Well, there's a first for everything, right? Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome to Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. And apparently nothing would be the podcast I just recorded because I just spent 25 minutes talking into a microphone that wasn't recording. What a fucking world we live in, Dave. What a world. A world where you could just stare at yourself in the computer, like I'm doing right now because I'm recording this on video and audio, and talk to yourself, thinking that the entire listener base is listening, and nobody heard a fucking thing. So anyway, let's try and recap that to the best of my ability with the same emotionality and the same emphasis on the wrong syllable. Wow, this is going to take a miracle. You're hearing this in real time. I'm not going to cut any of that part out. I just recorded not an entire, but I got off to a really strong start about collecting and about the human nature of collecting. And then I looked. I just wanted to see how long I was recording for, and I wasn't recording at all. So I'm recording this on November 11th, 2024. I think it's good for context because tomorrow I turn 45. I feel 45, but I did record an episode that would have been episode 18 of season 2, come after the long slow death of comics, which is the previous episode. But I realized it's too strong, heavy-handed themes that you might not want to hear about. I recorded an episode right after the results of the election about the upcoming regime, about where we came from, how we got here, and not in a way that it's going to be very blame heavy or anything like that. It's more about why are we in this position and how I feel about it and certain other things. And I was letting people know. I wanted to let people know that that episode's incoming, and I understand if you don't want to listen to it. But if you do enjoy hearing my point of view on things, you'll like hearing me get a little angry, use a couple of hundred F words, then you might enjoy that episode. But I don't know when it's going to come out. Here's the gist. Let me give you a little insight into what's coming up. I am going to Japan in 9 days. Well, I'm leaving in 8 days, but I get there on the 20th. I'm really excited for that. I'm trying to put out 20 episodes for the season to keep the season lengths at 20 episodes. So, just wanted to prepare you for that. But that's where I was. So I'm like, you know what? Let me record another episode. So this is going to be episode 18. And I was talking to 2 friends, Derek and Sean, separately. And was just talking about collecting. But I was telling them about how I wasn't really sure what to talk about. And then it kind of just something that's been on my mind on and off for a while is about just the human nature of collecting and why we collect and why I collect. I started this episode that didn't end up recording, and I started talking about trying to get to the bottom of why you don't see too many women in the collecting space in general. And I don't mean comics, and I don't mean I just mean in general. Throughout my life, I've had a lot of female friends, and I've dated a couple of females that didn't collect. I mean, my most recent ex, the one that handed me all this fucking trauma, she had a big book collection, but she was a reader. So I don't know, I look at a book collector as being somebody that might collect antiquarian books, stuff like that, or art books. But it's just weird because the way I look at collecting, in a sense of the male-dominated space, whether it's comics or it's cards or it's toys or records, I don't come across too many females that are in those spaces. And I'm using it kind of as a percentage-wise. There is a small percentage, sure. Shout out to Kate from Kate's Comics. She's somebody that's in she's a comic collector. She's a big comic reader. Just really knowledgeable about comics in general and characters. But for example, like I used to live with my friend's girlfriend and him, Charis and Ed. They got married, and Charis is a big reader, but she wasn't a collector. She was, you know, like she's like her bedside table or whatever always had like a copy of Black Hole, Charles Burns, and that was like one of her favorite books. In just in general, not just in comics, but she was a big reader. But like she treated this stuff like books, like she just kind of like tossing around. Like every once in a while, I'd see her reading like a graphic novel, and there's like water damage on it. I'm like, what are you doing? Because I'm just like keeping a nice shape. But that's two different types of the brain, right? I like to keep my stuff in good condition for two reasons. Even just stuff that I'm reading or records or whatever it is that I still use. I just want it to look and feel nice as it did. Like when people are like, oh, it looks so nice when it's got some wear on it. I'm like, I'm not that person. I'm like, I like it to look nice and shiny. But that's that I'm a clean person. I mean, there's different types of people. But anyway, getting into the collecting thing, I was also trying to figure out what I can do in this podcast or what I'm not doing in this podcast to try and bring in a female audience and a more diverse audience too, not just female, but like across the board diverse. I look at some of the statistics of who's listening, and I'm just like, I wish there was just a little bit. Like, I'm never going to appeal to the younger crowd in general. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to rizz up. I don't have the rizz for the 18 to 24 crowd. But in my, 35 to 50 demographic, which most of you, lie in for the most part, not completely, I'm just trying to figure out what else I could talk about or things that I could do differently to bring in a diverse crowd. I think diversity is the key to just overall success in general, with the exception of maybe being a president, because apparently you can be appealing to like 2 or 3 people or types of people and you win. But that's besides the point. I'm more like A24. Yes, my favorite movie studio currently. You could find somebody that loved the movie Moonlight, and you could find a totally different group of people that love Midsummer, but then you can also appeal to both of them with, I don't know, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Whatever it is, I just enjoy diversity. I think diversity, not just important, but it is definitely the key to success. And so I start thinking about collecting and where it comes from and why we don't see too many female collectors in our hobby or in general in the hobbies. I'm just trying to think, like some of my oldest friends, like my friend Jill. I mean, she's a big art appreciator. She produces photo shoots. She's big into photography, big into music. Like her and her husband have a nice record collection that they listen to, but nothing in the collectible space. Art books, maybe. But then it's interesting because the one area that I do see a lot of female collectors in, to the point of almost being 50-50 these days, horror memorabilia and horror stuff. I see a lot of, and I love that because back when I was a kid and I used to go to, and as a teenager, I used to go to Chiller show in New Jersey and the Fangoria show in New York. You didn't see too many females there. I mean, you saw some, but we didn't have a more horror friendly vibe for females. And I'm glad that it changed. I'm glad that it got better. I think horror is a genre that everybody likes. Like it doesn't discriminate, right? And everybody has the propensity or the opportunity to love horror their own. I mean, if you watched my YouTube video that I did with Daniel Warren Johnson, Becky Cloonan, Matt Wagner, and Kelly Jones, we did, our top 5 favorite horror movies, and Becky had a great list, and there's so many, and they all had great lists, and everybody picked different types of movies, and they weren't just just the straight up slashers. There was everything. So there is diversity in the movies themselves too, or diverse types of horror movies. But I always strive to be inclusive in this space, and also on my YouTube channel for West Coast Davengers, because like there's so much to learn, and the more people from different backgrounds that are creating, and the more people from different backgrounds that are consuming those creations and talking about them. Like, I want to learn about other things. I want to learn about things that come from other backgrounds and, books, movies, and stuff. Here's a good example of a movie that was not made for me, but I still watched it. And like, even though I didn't love it, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed that it exists. It's a movie called I Saw the TV Glow. Now, I didn't know anything about it going in, plot-wise or anything. I don't even think I had seen a trailer. I knew, the only thing I knew is some of the music that was used in the movie and some of the musicians that were involved in it. And that was enough for me to be like, I'll check it out. Partee Strange was one of the people involved with some of the songs in there, and Phoebe Bridgers and a couple other artists I can't think of right now. But that movie was made apparently, after I read a little bit about it, I should say, about the trans experience and, for trans people. And I think the director might be trans. Either way, it was interesting to me because it was like, oh, I'm being exposed to something that I might not have had I just been like closed off, or had I not been tapped into a music scene that was a little bit more closed off and not known about those artists being part of it. But whatever it was, I'm just glad that it exists. I'm glad that I saw it. And that's just all in part of being open to things. But anyway, getting back to collecting, I just wonder if there's something else, or maybe like a guest I could have on to bring in an audience that's more, some more diversity. I don't know. I'm not pandering to it. I'm just wanting to be more inclusive, but trying to explore how, because I'm just me. I don't have every idea. I barely have 3 ideas. Maybe like 2.2. Anyway, growing up as a collector, I don't really know how I started collecting. It must have been with baseball cards. That's got to be the first thing that I collected, because my dad, who grew up in the 40s and 50s, he collected baseball cards and comics. He has a brother. Now, he told me that my grandma, his mom, threw all this stuff in the incinerator, which, like, apparently every kid that grew up in the 50s or early 60s, that reached 17 in the, in the 60s, apparently all their parents just fucking tossed everything out. Like, we were a throwaway society years before anybody would think of that term. Which is just interesting. I start to, the older I get, the more I think it was bullshit. Like, a lot of that wasn't true, but I don't know. Unfortunately, all my grandparents are no longer here to ask them that. I probably asked them that when I was a kid or when I was a early 20-something, but I haven't had a grandparent alive in, I don't know, 15, 16 years. It's getting harder to keep track of when my grandparents passed away. Anyway, that's not what this show's about. I'm not here to talk about dead grandparents. Anyway, so I think, my brother's 4 years older, so my dad probably got into cards again when my son, oh my God, my brother was, a kid. And then I came along and, we all went to card shows together and comic shows, but I kept, obviously, the collecting on the longest, and I tapped into it harder. And I think that's just a consequence of me being the right age at the, the junk era of cards and the junk era of comics. But I always enjoy, I think one of the things that I enjoy the most about collecting, and it's something I spoke about recently with my buddy Dave, the other Davenger, Dave Correa, this guy. We were talking when he was here a couple weeks ago about how collecting kind of brings us that human connection. And I think it's something that I spoke about. It's something that I spoke about with Daniel Warren Johnson also. Like, we're all kind of trying to find more human connections. And we find that through collecting a lot of times, because the deeper that we go into collecting, we meet 1, we meet 2, maybe we meet 15 people. And this is, I'm talking pre-internet. Maybe we meet 15 people in our childhood that are collectors, and a couple of them stick around. Or like, you find out that you both like this really niche thing and you form a bond over it, and that bond, just grows stronger and stronger. Or in my case, you take a toy and knock down another kid's castle, and you become friends. And that's my friend Seth, who was my oldest friend. We went to preschool together, and I don't know what age we were. Let's just pick a number between 4 and 7, and we'll call it that. But he was building like a castle made of blocks, and I had my Ram Man figure from He-Man Masters of the Universe, which, if you don't know, you could look it up. But he was kind of like this little short guy. You press this button on the back of his ankle and his legs extend, and he has this big metal head helmet thing. And that's why he's called Ram Man. The names of the He-Man toys and the He-Man characters weren't exactly rocket science. He-Man, Skeletor, Man-E Faces, Man-at-Arms. You get the Evil Lyn, Tila, She-Ra. Anyway, Orko. So I knocked down his castle. I think we got into a little fight, and whatever, how kids fight. And then we became friends. And then we found out we lived 3.5 blocks from each other. And now we've been friends for 40 years. And our parents have taken multiple vacations together over the last 25 years, because they're both, they're all retired. And, he's one of the closest people in my life. Plus, we grew up collecting together. We did so much together. We experienced so much of our childhoods together, doing all of these things. Whether it was collecting comics or cards, going to the Javits Center for the New York comic shows, the Big Apple Con, collecting autographs together, hockey games, Pearl Jam shows, 311 shows. Like, we did so much together. And I'm blessed, and I'm fortunate enough to know that he has always been in my corner, and vice versa. And that as long as we're both still here, we're going to be friends. And somebody that I hope I get, another 45 years with. And that human, that connection started from whatever, like an argument, but our love of all of these geeky, nerdy things is what kind of just strengthened it. We used to haunt the same comic shops together. We used to ride our bikes to them. We used to, just all these things. I was the best man at his wedding. He's probably seen me at my drunkest once or twice, or fucking a lot, or my stonedness highest. Still can't forget that one. Ohio, Halloween, watching the Blair Witch DVD menu high as fuck for 45 minutes until he came down to his room and said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm watching the Blair Witch. He's like, "No, you're just watching the menu." And then another person that purely became my closest friend out of collecting autographs is my buddy Scott. We knew each other very peripherally, probably like when we were 16, 17, collecting autographs at Nassau Coliseum, Islanders and away hockey teams and wrestling and stuff like that. And then I don't remember, like, his car broke down one day, and I just remember that, and then talking to him, and then inviting him somewhere with me and my friend Derek to get autographs. Might have been Manhattan, whatever it was. And we were like 17 or 18 at the time. We both worked in the same mall together, and we became friends. And like over the course of a couple of years, we became really close friends. And then it was somebody that was like, became my buddy that I'd go travel with. We went to Canada. We went to the UK. We interstate travel. We went to California together. Like he was my closest friend. And it's somebody that in the collecting space, that's what brought us to be closer. Our love, and then our love for like introducing each other to different music. I introduced him to like going to Pearl Jam shows in turn. And some of you might say this is not a good trade-off. He introduced me to going to Dave Matthews shows, which I went to a fuck ton with him. And, we've probably been to, I don't know, let's just say for shits and giggles, 20 shows, probably 300 to 400 shows together over the course of our friendship. And it all started from collecting. And I think now that we move forward into the age of like the collecting space being on the internet, and being able to meet people via the internet in a pretty organic way through these communities that either we've created or we've been part of, or both. I think we are still craving that human connection through the shared love of how we collect, what we collect, and what we like. And I know sometimes I push back against some of the methods that these communities exist in, or some of the words that get used to describe the things that they're going after or how they go after. And that's just a branching off conversation. But in the roots of it all, I really do feel fortunate enough to have met so many great people through the hobbies that I love. And I think we just really crave, in a world that grows increasingly larger, and by that I mean every day there's a new way to discover things, there's a new way to branch out, but we all want something to keep us kind of grounded, a core, like a core friend group, whatever it is. And I used to have that. I had many core friend groups, but they all dissipate because you grow up, you grow apart. Now that the people, at least that I grew up with, and people that are in their 40s, we're a little too old to well, not all of us, but I think generally we're trying not to make new friends and throw out old friends. We're trying to strengthen the friendships that we have. And I really do think it's an amazing time to be able to connect to people in the niche ways that we connect. Like, if you have a love for a couple of things that I have a love for, then we've got that common ground. And then if we add on the fact that, oh, dude, check out what I found today at a garage sale, or check out what I found today in the shop in, Bellingham. And you're like, oh, that's so dope. Let me know if you ever find another one of those, and you start talking about it. I mean, and the connection in the collecting and the connection in art and the love for comics in general is really, it really does get stronger. Case in point was Jim Rugg, who, I did not know him in a personal way. I had him on the channel twice, and we got to know each other a little bit better. And then after Ed passing away, and I met him at Heroes, and we started talking and having some real conversation. And then being in Pittsburgh and hanging out with him, it's this is somebody that I knew that I had a lot in common with, that we had a lot of cross interests, but I didn't know I'd ever have the opportunity to strengthen that, to sit in a car with him for a couple hours, a couple of days in a row, and strengthen that connection. And on somebody some of you that are listening to this, Tyler and Sean and Derek, and so on and so forth. There's a couple of Seans. I mean, we haven't met in real, in person to person, but it's we already know how much in common we do have or don't have, Mr. Nelson, and but how much we do have in common. It's right there, we are old enough to know that that brings us closer as people. And most people who are listening to me, if you have I don't really put up too much of a wall. My morals, you understand where my morals are most of the times on most things, so you can already make the choice. I don't want to fucking have anything to do with this guy. And I wish we all kind of came with that. I've had some very public talking about certain people that I was friends with, and then boom, it's just not a thing anymore. And it's because, well, morally, we don't match up with each other. If I don't like you, or I have a problem with you, you're going to know it. And that's your choice to do with it what you may. But in collecting, I think there's, I talk a lot about methods that people use to gain following, or methods that people collect with that make me think that they're just surface level, and that's fine. Tell me who you are. I think the world would be better if we told each other who we were from the get-go. I think in dating, that's really would really be a nice thing to know. But there's always that getting to know you phase, honeymoon phase, whatever you want to call it. But I love the fact that this hobby brings the human connection element. When we talk about the things that we love and the niche ways that we love them, I think it really shows you're bearing yourself a little bit more. You're bearing your soul. You're being honest. And I think it's just it's like there is this, and then there's always the talk about how collecting can be unhealthy, how it's there's definitely pieces of it that are a mechanism, a coping mechanism to whatever mental health struggles that you have. Like this thing is going to make me feel better. It's going to fill a hole. But I do believe that there are healthy ways to, there's healthy ways to do everything. But I think the collecting space can be really healthy for people to, find a connection. I spoke with Danny Warren Johnson. I had the interview up on this channel, and as well, I had it up on West Coast Davengers. And we spoke about the human connection and like how art does bring that. Like if you're into, when you're looking to meet somebody, whether like in the dating sphere or, or whatever like that, I think there's always a bond that you can make with somebody, even if it's just trying to have conversation over some piece of art that you both share in common. And I always use that word to describe music, movies, TV, literature, and physical illustration, all that. There are merits to speaking to other people about the things that you love in that way. It's just, I wonder where we really split in the sexes, in the species. I wonder where we separate in the species of the collecting bug. Like, I think it'd be nice to meet somebody who I was interested in, romantically, that was into collecting. But I don't know if those two things would clash. But then there's the whole thing, like, you hear these like kind of buzz studies or whatever. It's like what turns women off the most. And it's like guys who play video games, which I guess I can understand. I'm not a huge gamer. I when I'm at the end of the night, I do like to play video games, from like 9 to 10 o'clock or 9 to 11 o'clock, whatever, just to wind my brain down and shut it off. Because if I put on a movie, I'm just going to fall asleep. I like to read in the morning because it helps me wake up. But I bet you there's definitely like something that would be like, oh, what's the turn on for you? Well, guys that read or women that read, and I'm not no fucking love doctor, but I just wonder where the differential is for why generally men collect and women don't. I don't know. I do not know. But anyway, that was a little bit ranty. It was definitely a little bit less focused than what I had originally recorded, but you can't always get what you want. You can try sometimes. Maybe you get what you need. I never really liked the Stones. I was a Beatles guy. I don't dislike the Stones like I used to, but I will always be a Beatles fan. I would never call myself a Stones fan. Although Painted Black is a great song. And Sympathy for the Devil is a great song. I love that Guns N' Roses covered it for Interview with a Vampire soundtrack. Shut up, Tyler. And I was just never a huge fan of Mick and the boys. But now I can definitely say I appreciate them a lot more than I didn't when I was 17 to 25. I will say I still do not like Led Zeppelin. Nobody's going to convince me to like Led Zeppelin at 45. It's just not going to happen. Sorry, Seth. I love how I'm giving people personal lines in this. Anyway, I want to say thank you to everybody that's listened to this podcast, whether it's from the beginning, whether it's last week. This podcast serves to give me a platform to talk about the things that are on my mind, to talk about things that maybe I try and like that aren't really comics related, that are better for me not to care about the visual element and just talk. There are definitely going to be some more planned out episodes, and I still want to push the interviews, but I'm going to be in Japan, and I think that's really it's going to yield some great episodes of stuff to talk about. I'm trying to not structure my trip so much as that I have to, but I might try and record at least something, if not every day, every couple of days. Maybe it just gets mashed into one episode. We're getting ready for the end of season 2. I'm excited to take a break, let my voice rest, let my brain rest. Before I let anything rest, please hit the subscribe button if you're not. Subscribe on a platform, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. It's all there. Let me know if there's something. Drop a comment in one of the formats anywhere. Drop a comment and let me know if there's anywhere that this podcast is not on that you think it should be on. If that's something that you feel strongly about this podcast, like I do, leave a review on Spotify or Apple. You can drop a comment on YouTube. That definitely helps. But the helpfulness is in the reviews. And before we get going, speaking of reviews, now I did say I would, give shout outs to people who left comments and, reviews and stuff. So I'm just going to read a quick comment that somebody left, a new subscriber. And I appreciate everybody that does comment. I will eventually shout you out. But the long, slow murder of comics, Christopher, I'm going to try not to murder your name, Deschambeau, which it should be completely accurate. He wrote, and this is just a short one, don't worry about the progress of the channel. Subscriber count will grow plenty in time. Stay positive. We're here for you, Dave, and the content you make is amazing. Christopher, I really appreciate that. It doesn't take a lot to really put a smile on my face, especially in days like this and in times like this. But yeah, it really did put a smile on my face. Now, Walty, I know you're listening. I'm not going to read a 4-paragraph comment, but I love you, dude. Big shout out to Walty also. But that makes me smile also. Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode of Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. Remember, in the dark times, look to the light. Oh man, that's from The Last of Us. I love you. It's times like this you learn to love the best, the best. Okay, bye. That didn't stop recording.